Listen to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. It's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fed, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
A divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness. With your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together we transform.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hi, this is John Lear.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we have an extremely exciting show with our very special guest, John Lear. And we're going to have a panel with Karen Christine Patrick, who is a regular co-host on the Aquarian Radio Network, with myself and Dr. Lesson, and we're going to have Dr. Ken Johnston, former Apollo astronaut. And let me tell you a little bit about John and Ken. I know that Sean is very busy behind the scenes getting everybody on the queue here while we're doing this introduction. So John is the son of William P. Lear, designer of the Learjet executive aircraft, the 8-track stereo system, and founder of Lear Inc., now Lear Siegler Corp., a large defense contractor. He wrote extensively about airplanes and other subjects and was a Middle East correspondent for Combat Illustrated between 75 and 77 while stationed in Lebanon with a cargo airline. Mr. Lear retired in 2001, having flown over 150 different types of aircraft, and as an airline pilot, having flown over 19,500 hours in 60 countries for 25 different airlines. At age 28, John, he was one of the youngest Boeing 707 captains to fly in airline commercial service. In a flirtation with politics, John was once a candidate for Nevada State Senator, and he's an amateur astronomer and photographer. He's won several awards for his photos, and he is has 4 daughters, lives in Las Vegas with his wife Marilee, and she's a former actress with Warner Brothers. And in John's dad, William P. Lear Sr., was president and chairman of the board of Lear Inc., who in 1952 became the government's primary contractor for anti-gravity. That is, in 1952, anti-gravity. To the concern of the Pentagon, John's dad was outspoken in his belief of the existence of extraterrestrial visitors. However, John did not become interested in the subject until 1985, when UFO stories captured his attention. John believed that in 1954, then U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower met secretly with several ETs at Muroc Flight Test Center, which was later Edwards Air Force Base. Apparently, no agreement of any sort was reached. Then, about 10 years later, in April of 1964, another meeting between ETs and U.S. government took place at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. 3 saucers landed out of the prearranged area, and a meeting was held between the aliens and intelligence officers of the U.S. government. We're still trying to get John. Sorry for this noise in the background, but I'll read a little bit more, and then I'll talk about Ken, and then we'll start the show one way or the other. So, John believes in the work of Perry Spolter, who in 1993 wrote the book The Gravitational Force of the Sun, which scientifically and mathematically proved that Newton's equation for gravitational force is wrong, and that neither size nor density of a planet figures in the gravitational force. So we're using the Boolean inverse square equation for the gravity of the moon, and it works out that the moon's gravity is 85% of that of Earth and provides a breathable atmosphere for the 250 million humans not originally from Earth that John believes lives on the moon. I certainly hope we can get John on the show. John also believes that there are many civilizations far below the surface of the Earth, some looking like humans, some very strange looking, and most of which mankind on the surface will never learn about. And John believes we humans were on the moon by 62 and Mars by 67, and that the NASA Apollo program was a hoax and never put a man on the moon. And I researched this Stanley Kubrick confession. I put some videos on our page on aquarianradio.com for those who want to take a look at some of that information and evaluate it for yourself. John believes that there are 40 planets in our solar system, not the mere 9 that NASA tells about, and that all these planets and their moons have together thousands of civilizations, including massive civilizations that are built in space and don't use planets for a base. Sean, I don't know if you managed to get John on yet, but I'll keep reading. Hopefully get him soon. Let's tell you about, our listeners, about Ken Johnston. Dr. Ken Johnston Sr. is one of 4 Civilian Astronaut Consultant Pilots from the Apollo Moon Program. He's a retired aerospace engineer, U.S. Marine, and NASA whistleblower. And he had these 8x10 glossies. He refused to strictly follow orders and destroy a nearly complete collection of these photo prints from the Apollo program, photos that are not available from NASA at this time and are of a higher resolution than what is generally found online in space agency databases. And there's a frame of one of Johnston's photos, which was analyzed by Bret Sheppard, and it's on our website. And let me go a little bit further down here, and then we'll make a decision what to do here. Okay, let's start with Ken, and I guess, Sean, we can keep trying to reach. Let's see, he's going to try John's Skype now. I'm getting a message from our producer, Sean Bell. Sasha, what would you like to say before we figure out
yes, I'd like to say I really looked at this, at just what Ken Johnston's information is, and it seems to me that he's been chosen by someone really high up to lead us to disclosure, that the moon photos that he has made public were actually given to him with a wink kind of a thing, for the purpose of letting us know that we have indeed, as Lear says too, been on the moon way before the so-called manned moon shot that everyone saw on television. And also we know that the Kubrick film was a film that they took just in case the astronauts got smashed or something terrible happened to them, and it was an encased thing. So that it seems that, yes, everything seems to be converging on the fact that we have had people on the moon for some time, and that Ken Johnston has been the one that's chosen to let us know about this.
Can you hold for one moment, honey? I'm getting horrible feedback. Sean, are you getting this feedback? Maybe we should try to use our cell phone for the show, or our home phone. There we go. What was that? Okay, the feedback stopped. I don't know what was going on, but it was overriding what Dr. Lesson was saying. Sean, is everything sounding good on your end? Except he's trying to reach John again. Okay, it's good. Okay, go ahead. Say what you were saying, sweetheart. I'm sorry, but it was just, I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, well, what we can expect from John is that he's going to be able to tell us about Ike's meeting with the ETs, about this breathable.
We've got the phones ringing. We're trying to get John Lear's trying to get back in and all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the interesting things that John's saying is that there are many planets in our solar system. He says there's 40 of them, and lots of them are occupied, and all this is being hidden from us. So and that there's civilizations on these planets and also on motherships. And the evidence, as I start looking at it, more and more and more converge on the things that John Lear has been telling us for some time now.
Okay, so let's start with Ken Johnston while we're trying to get John on. And Sean, if you could Skype me the number that Karen can call. Maybe she can call in on her second number that we can't reach, or so they can both hear the show. And all right, well, welcome to the show, Ken. Sorry we're so discombobulated today. We're having technical difficulties, but it's very good to have you back on the show again.
It's the famous statement, Houston, we have a problem, right? Okay. No, I'm here loud and clear.
Excellent, excellent. So it's let me just ask you a technical question. Is Karen able to hear the show?
I'm sorry, go ahead, say it again,
the way
please.
You have it. Is Karen able to listen in on the show? The way you're both in the same house right now.
Yes, she is.
Okay, and she can talk.
She's trying to dial in. I don't know. She's listening. She's listening in though.
Okay,
now, I'm on
but
her
is she
phone.
able to speak?
I'm on her phone now.
Okay, so if she wants to talk, she can chime in. Is that correct?
That's correct. If we need her, I can hand her the phone. I figured it'd be best.
Yeah, ideally she could call into the show on her home phone, and when you would both be on, but you'd have to be in different rooms.
Okay, that's what she's going to do.
Okay, well, I have to give her the number. So one second while I ask Sean which number.
Can you hear?
Typing that in.
Yeah, Ken, do you have any evidence at all or feedback on whether or not there's breathable atmosphere on the moon the way that John Lear is saying?
Well, that's actually the first time I've heard, and some of the analysis, particularly on Mars, down inside the big canyon, Mare Villanaris, that's low enough that there would be enough of an atmosphere that we would not have to wear our spacesuits. Although all the instruments and everything that we took with us, the crews took with them to the moon, everywhere we landed, we definitely had to use our spacesuits in order to be able to go outside of our spacecraft. Now, there were some other things I was listening to, John. By the way, I'm very honored to be on the program with John Lear. And interesting enough, I also was a flight instructor for the Boeing company on 737 aircraft, so we probably crossed paths somewhere. Anyway, so biggest concern we had was to begin with, and he covered some of this, is that the atmosphere inside the command module and the lunar module originally was designed to be 100% pure oxygen. And if anybody knows anything at all about the equipment, pure oxygen will make anything burn, even metal. And that once the Apollo 1 fire, we had to go back and redesign and change the environmental control systems inside both command module and lunar modules to be at 14 psi. With a combination of oxygen and, the other element we needed so that we weren't in a pure oxygen environment. So, and we did not have to free breathe in order because we were using an atmosphere similar to what our bodies are used to here on the planet Earth. So, if there were a dome or some facility that the astronauts could go into, and like an airlock, because I've done it in airlocks inside the vacuum chambers, and pump it down to or bring the atmosphere up to the equivalent that the astronauts could breathe, we would be able to take off our suits and go inside. But as far as being able to be in an area that we've landed on the moon, I'm not aware of any of them that had sufficient atmosphere, because we're talking about 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, and of course the gravity has a great deal to do with the amount and the thickness of the atmosphere for us to be able to go without spacesuits. So right now, I'm certainly not aware of anything that we did during the Apollo that would say that we could go without our spacesuits. It would be nice if we could, but no. We watched them, and I was there and watched them firsthand. So I personally am convinced and know that we were not able to go without spacesuits. outside of our.
Are there subterranean? Are there subterranean the caverns and stuff like that on the moon that might have a different kind of atmosphere than the surface?
Well, even if you found a cavern, it would have to be one that was airtight, so that you could increase the atmosphere sufficient for a human being. So I mean, you couldn't just walk inside of a cave and then say, "Oh, well, I can take off my suit." It doesn't work like that. You're going to have to actually, let's see, well, it'd be very similar to the vacuum chambers. We had to go inside our airlock, and we had to pump the airlock down to the 10 to the minus 12 torr, which is the equivalent of the atmosphere on the lunar surface, which is about 1 molecule of air for every cubic foot. So that's not very much air to breathe.
So they did an analysis of the air once they were there and got the composition of what was their air like on the moon? Is that what you're saying?
Each one of the missions carried with them what we call the ALSUP. It's the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package. That I was the test director for the descent stage of the lunar module. This was after we had already proved the upper stage and everything, and trained Neil and Buzz to land on the moon for Apollo 11. Then the other guys we were training, as well as those just using a descent stage in Building 13 at Johnson Space Center, in order to show them so they could go to the payload bay, open up the hatch, be able to take out the various pieces of equipment that they were going to set up as part of the experiments on the lunar surface. And part of that was to determine how much of an atmosphere, which basically wasn't much, but we did that, as well as we sampled the amount of solar wind by the solar panels that we put up, not for power, but I mean it's a type of mylar that would later be analyzed in the laboratories to see how much solar radiation impacted on that those panels. So we were testing every mission we went on, what kind of atmosphere each one of the locations where we landed are, and certainly we're unable to go without a spacesuit.
Were there windstorms, Mars is depicted as having these terrible windstorms. What about the moon? Are there sandstorms and windstorms on the moon?
If you don't have any atmosphere, as I said, 10 to the minus 12 torr, which is extremely, almost a total vacuum. A good example would be on Mars for you, Dr. Sasha, is like the movie that's out right now, The Martian, and the author of it, he'll tell you that he later, because he wrote the book before they totally were convinced how much atmosphere there was on Mars. And basically, if you're at the medium altitude of sea level, we'll call it that, on Mars, with and you had a wind, one of the windstorms, dust storms coming at you at about 200 to 300 knots, miles per hour, whatever. It would be the equivalent of someone just putting up and blowing their breath at you real hard, because there's not enough atmosphere to be able to carry the kind of dust and do the damage that movie showed. I mean, in the movie, it almost knocked the spacecraft over. But the movie is a great movie. It's a lot of fun to see how a person survived on it. And the author will tell you that he knows that he wrote it on a premise that wasn't correct, and that was that there was enough atmosphere to knock over the antenna, and he got pierced and stabbed by the antenna. That would not have happened. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I wondered about that. Of course, that's really inspiring to show that an intelligent human being can figure out a lot of things, and you get a team of intelligent human beings, they can do miracles.
Yeah.
So that's go ahead. Your turn. Oh, I was going to say, a lot of the people are saying that they're lying about the atmosphere on both the Mars and Moon, and they're saying that this is a lie that we ever landed, or that there were different space programs, and it just seems every other day you're hearing something new about the disinformation. NASA never a straight answer, and the secret space program, and the real space program, and now the hoax landing. What do you think of all that?
Well,
you were there.
On Mars, I think a perfect example is, on the Earth, if we go up to the top of Mount Everest, 23,000 feet, people just barely can survive it, and they have to, like John Lear said, they've got to condition themselves as they go up to be able to breathe there. And the same thing with on Earth, as you come down to sea level, then you have a lot more dense atmosphere, and your body can get a lot more oxygen out of the atmosphere to live. Now, on Mars, I'm saying, let's look at the same way as on the surface, the mean average altitude of that, and then you go down inside Villa Marineris, inside of the canyon, giant canyon, several miles down. Let's say that the atmosphere then could be substantially stronger, or enough pressure that you would possibly not have to have a spacesuit to get around. You might be able to do it just with an oxygen mask to give you more oxygen at that particular level. So that to me sounds plausible.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to give Karen the number to call in, so tell her to look at her message. She can call in to be on at the same time. Go ahead, Sasha.
She's dialing the number now.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Okay, so Lear is saying that there's plenty of planets that whose presence has been hidden from us, and that many of them are inhibited, and that there are mothercraft with civilizations on board within our solar system too. Do you have any information or scuttlebutt from the professionals on any of that?
Well, I would say, the spacecraft that he described around, I believe, Saturn, would certainly be what we would call a Dyson sphere, which would be, basically, it's a planet all into itself. And that is entirely plausible. Now, what do I have as far as experience on that? If we go into what I experienced down in Scottsdale, and I'm now willing to say that by having the opportunity to go with Dr. Sasha Lesson and go into regression, that one of the mothercraft that I wound up being taken into would have been in the same category that John Lear was talking about. I mean, a planet all into itself. So that's
how big. How big is this kind of? How large?
If you're talking about a civilization that is not just a few years or 100 years, we're talking about civilizations that are thousands of years older than we are. Then you're talking about the possibility that if the solar system or wherever they originated at was becoming uninhabitable, that they certainly could be able to, over a period of thousands of years, be able to build a livable Dyson sphere type spacecraft. So it's one person's science fiction is another person's science, and eventually we get there.
Right. What about the theory that the moon is hollow and in itself it is a artificial, perhaps Dyson sphere? What do you think of that concept?
Well, and I have the photographs of the seismic instruments that we put on the lunar surface, and each time we rendezvoused with our spacecraft during Apollo 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. Once we transferred all of the lunar samples and material we needed out of the lunar module into the command module, we would remotely back the lunar module away from the command module, fire the RCS thrusters, set it up to descend and impact on the lunar surface. Well, I have the photographs of the seismic instruments. It showed that the moon rang like a bell. In fact,
right.
When you have an earthquake or a volcanic eruption, usually it's a tremendous amount of noise, if you will, on the instruments, and then it tapers off, and as things settle down pretty quickly. Well, the moon rang like a bell, and it took it 6 days for it to finally get down to a negligible amount of vibration. So that would say that. Now you've got the other thing, and even Buzz Aldrin the European Space Agency did an experiment from Mars, transmitting a signal so that the Mars moon, one of the moons, would be going through that signal. And by analyzing the way the signal was affected, they were able to determine that Martian moon was probably hollow. A great deal of it was hollow inside. Same thing with our moon. For it to ring like that, our moon has to have enough hollow spaces inside of it. So looks like there's evidence that there's a great deal of space inside of our moon.
This seems to be a sort of a field that's opening up, that even the Earth has way more space, caverns, tunnels, actual spaces than we had been aware of.
So you talking about the hollow Earth?
The Earth itself. Theory? Yeah, I'm not saying necessarily hollow. I'm saying big spaces anyhow. We know there's huge spaces under Argentina and Antarctica for sure.
I haven't had the pleasure of going down inside it, but I have certainly done research on a lot of the tunnels and places where that civilizations have gone under inside the Earth, but then inside spaces, areas where that they can have transportation or what have you from one place on the Earth to another. So I think there's enough real evidence that we can say yes, there probably is a lot of usable space. Cappadocia in Turkey. That's Bret Sheppard. He's here with us too, and he's an expert on a lot of these things. Said hi.
Well, you can hand him the mic sometimes, so he can add to his 2 cents.
What would you like to say,
What would you like to say, Bret?
As soon as we get the house phone logged in, we'll be able to give him one, and he'll be okay. And
you're not on yet. Okay.
No, he's not on. I'm the go-between.
Okay, I'll see what's going on. Okay, you're the go-between. Okay, I'll ask Sean to try to, or Karen has to try calling in again. Tell her to call in again.
Okay,
Sean's ready to call her in.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, in the meantime, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. We're having to revert back to the old-fashioned way of a runner in between two colonies here. We're doing good.
Well, you got to be careful. You're not very close to each other because you'll get the feedback and it'll sound horrible. So, but she can call in on a different line, and then we can.
So you alluded to basically a community in space that you visited on more than one occasion. Could you tell us some more about what this community was like and how you came to be there?
Yeah, this is what you got in your regression.
The interesting thing here is that I thought I had only been regressed for about 15 to 20 minutes, and when you folks told me I was out for 2 hours and 15 minutes was just hard for me to grasp. I have not personally watched or listened to that because we're waiting on getting the right person with the right camera so that they can film my reaction to some of the things that went on and what we said and happened. The only experience that I do remember from the regression that you did was the group of us young people, students that had been taken to their mother planet to be trained to eventually someday in our lives become ambassadors between their civilization and ours. And we were on kind of an outing, and we were taken to this giant mothership. And it was very much like you see kids today. We weren't being herded, but we kind of were all going along and going past different places, and there were large windows, a window bay area that we could look out and see stars and planets and other spacecraft coming. And it was a huge vehicle. I don't recall going anywhere other than where the class was being taken and shown where different species of Homo sapiens were being, I guess, grown is the right term to use in test tubes, big giant type test tubes, and That's one of the things, as well as later in the communication center. So it was an outing that we did going to this big craft, which was enormous.
Can I ask about some of the fetuses that you saw? What did you notice? Were they what was their color? What did you notice about them?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The fetuses. What did you notice about what was being grown? Were they humanoid? Were they strange looking? Were they, reptilian or gray or other species that were not recognizable?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're talking about while we were being herded along, going to one place or another. There were other species of obviously sentient beings, and I recall the one was a woman, female. It was our primary teacher, and her skin was more of a very copper color, and she was not terribly tall. Whereas in one area where we went, they were very tall. I would call them Nordic type, blonde, blue-eyed type individuals, and they were reptilian type, or type skin. So there, I would say this must have been some type of craft that various intelligent beings from different areas all were working together. It was hopefully, I guess what they were expecting us to do is to experience something like that later on in our life timeline, that we would have the opportunity of working with humans here on Earth, so that we could then understand that we're all part of an intergalactic intelligent species. So you've taken me into a new era that I've never thought much about, and this is why I have never gone forward talking about this before until after the regression hypnosis that you put me through, and I'm still gleaning more information that took place there, and that I'm recalling as time goes on.
Great. What did you notice about the way the ship that conveyed you to this other ship was propelled, and how was the ship, the larger ship, moving about or holding still, or what was the mechanics of all this, as much as you could tell?
Well, actually the memory that I recall, and until I watched the video, and you may have taken notes on it, is that I don't recall going up in a craft going up to this big mothership. I just recall we were all there in the craft when that memory started. That's now I do recall over a period of time that I was being taught how to fly one of the smaller little craft. And in fact, that I took one of them to try to go back to Earth, and then of course I got caught, and it was somewhat funny. But and then what people have to understand is that all of this took place over a period of years. Yet then I was put back into my timeline back in about 1948, 49, in this little town called Hart, H-A-R-T, Texas, is where my stepfather, T.C. Ray, lived, and that's where we were. So while the training has been taking place, I guess I can deduce from that there is some ability to manipulate time, and so we were brought back into that time, and we had to live out the experiences, and I think you brought it up. When you look at my life and the experiences that I've had and places where I've been at times, it seems like almost impossible that one person could have been at all of these places at the right time unless it was being manipulated to some extent. So,
yeah.
Do you think they did something to? I think I hear Karen. Do you think they did something to prevent you from aging during the time you're gone? Because wouldn't you look older to your parents if you were gone or were you gone just a short time? How long were you gone?
Well, that was just it. I recall over a period of years, I can remember at different stages in my life as I'm growing up on Earth, but that I would have been taken back and trained more and then bounced back in. And so that as far as other people, my mother and grandparents and other people that knew me, don't seem to be aware of any particular time frame where I was gone, because I'm being put back into my own timeline, and then I have to live out that part to where the training I received comes of some value. The fact that I had always thought of becoming a solar system ambassador, and it's amazing that that's exactly what I was tapped for by NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory to be one of their solar system ambassadors. So it's kind of.
Well, I was looking at that, and I was just wondering why they had such a term, a solar system ambassador, where in our reality we've only been to the moon. So they must have some awareness, or they were just joking or something. But they can't be joking. They were picking you as a solar system ambassador. I would think that they had some awareness that you really are a solar system ambassador, and that there is such a thing.
Well, I don't think
that was probably
I would say what you and Sasha and John and others are doing right now, and this is disclosure, that perhaps I'm just now becoming part of that organization or that team or the selectees or however you want to use it, that those of us that have been somewhat trained to come forward with the truth so that the rest of the people are more comfortable with being able to accept the fact that, we are just part of a whole galaxy of sentient beings, and we need to learn to get along together, and that's part of what our job's going to be. And right now, I think I'm doing part of that by being on the program with you folks.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, people are always asking, well, what can we do? How can we move to this new paradigm? And the answer I keep doing is that we're doing it right now. By continually having these shows, we're having 4 or 5 or 6 shows a week now with our network here. And, excuse me. People are starting to, like you're going on dozens of shows, and I think it's wonderful that this is the disclosure right now that we're talking about it, and our continual discussion of and connecting the dots, and each time we talk about it with somebody else, we get another piece of the puzzle and another aha. That is what's going into the morphogenic field and causing this acceleration of information and the awareness of consciousness, and that is disclosure. Now, John said, I hope we get him back at the end of the break here. We're going to try again so we don't keep making noises during the break, which is only like 3 minutes. But he said that there are 40 planets in our solar system, not just 9, and that all of these planets and their moons have together thousands of civilizations, including massive civilizations that are built in space and don't use planets for a base. What do you think of that based on, what you discovered as a contact experiencer? Do you think that that's feasible?
So it may come down to the definition of what you consider a planet, a planetoid, what have you, because our scientists have various terms they use. They tried to take our dear little planet Pluto and make it a non-planet, and now we're looking at, well, maybe it is a planet. And then we've got planetoids that we're discovering several within the asteroid belt, or the hammered bracelet, as it was called. There could well be more than what we have been able to observe, and that's what we've been growing towards. Now, and I'm one of these guys that I hate to go into speculation, say things that I don't have at least some knowledge of or been experienced or I was there. So as far as that many planets within our own solar system, that's a big leap. But I'm certainly able to say, get me the proof, take me there, let me see them, I'll believe it.
Okay, hopefully we can get John on and discuss that. Go ahead, Sasha, you had a question?
It's more of an observation. There's been a false clinging to the material here and now of our times, but when you take a broader perspective, for example, I regressed many people that go to different times just in their heads. They regress to past lives or past experiences, which then gives us information that we check out. For example, one of my teacher Stan Groff's clients was a Spanish priest who was in the breakup of the galleons when the Spanish Armada tried to conquer England. The guy got to shore and he hid his signet ring in this cave. And he was obsessed in therapy with this signet ring. And finally he got to England, he got to the place, the cliffs of Dover, wherever it was, and he found the signet ring. And time again, Stevenson's studies in India show that people say, oh yeah, I was born in this other family and I played this music and so forth. So that we know that people do time travel. We know that we can remote view and be in our consciousness can be in more than one place at a time. And a lot of what's been separated by this clinging to just this material reality that we're so familiar with has obfuscated the fact that there's a lot more going on. There's multidimensionality. You can be in more than one place at the same time, and you can be in different times, so that what seems like a few seconds or a few hours to your parents might have been years and years and years, or even centuries or millennia to you in your studies elsewhere.
I think that's fantastic. Our human brains are getting to the point where we're realizing that it's capable a lot more than what we've used them for in the past. And it's fascinating to understand that as Homo sapiens sapiens, we've basically created a timeline or created time so that we can understand it in our current existence in these shells that we're using right now. So we're learning more every day, and I'm learning more. So I'm keeping an open mind.
I heard Karen in the background, and Bret, do they have anything to add to the conversation?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Karen.
I hear
Welcome
you.
to the show.
Oh, great.
It's Karen Patrick.
Karen Christine Patrick is joining us.
Yeah, I called back in, and that did the magic, and thank you for having me on. I wanted to double back on the topic of the underground bases. The information I have is that at least it's honeycombed under the surface with very long tunnels. I was, in fact, on John Lehrer's TheLivingMoon.com website reading about the Bashigi Mountain, Romania story, and I had seen a video. It's in Romania. I have to find it, where one researcher said they put there was an underground cave in Romania that had water in it, and they put a dye pack in it to see where the dye would come out from, the mountain somewhere. And it actually came out in an underground place in California. So there's some kind of tunnel or portal between Romania and California. And in the Bashigi Mountain case, which you guys, hopefully Peter Moon was one of the ones who's been getting that information out, that facility had high-tech holographic imagery, and it also had 3 tunnels. One went to Tibet, one went to Egypt, and one went to Iraq. So there's a honeycomb tunnel system underneath. It's pretty vast. One insider told me there's more real estate underground than there is on the surface. And also mentioned the fact that if you were visiting a new planet, you generally would not go on the surface first. You would go and occupy an area underground and make your environmental, needs created first, your type of air you breathe, gravity, etc., before you ventured out on the surface. And there's some indication, and I think I've said it before, that happened in the Black Sea area, where there was a group of people who came from a mothership or perhaps a base on the moon, and they came down underground and then eventually emerged from underground to occupy and begin a colony on the surface in that area. And that was written up by an author named Nikolai Densusianu, who wrote his book about the Pelagians, and his book's 100 years old, and there he's talking about the king, Pelage, whose name means from the earth born. It means he came out from underground. So that whole underground, story, of course, there's the story of, in Tibet and the mountains in the Himalayas. People talk about underground facilities under many mountains, like Mount Shasta. I was at Mount Adams, East Ranch, and there were crafts that come out of the mountain there. So there's a lot going on under our feet. And we're kind of shielded from knowing too much about it. In the medieval days, they said, what's under our feet is hell, right? Probably felt that way if you went into a volcano. But yeah, there's a lot of stories about the underground that also connect to space, because in the story of the Illyrians or the Pelagians, the word Illyrian, that's what they call themselves. It means people from the stars. And so they knew, just like the indigenous people know, that they have star brothers and sisters from space and ancestors from space. This is a story that, when the Vatican came along and changed our history, they wanted the, biblical style history to be predominantly what people believed in. And they definitely, with extreme prejudice, suppressed these stories of these older stories that don't exactly have a narrative except in the Sumerian tablets and other with Dogon tribe stories and whatnot. So I just kind of wanted to throw in with that.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. So is Bret with us? Does he have things he wants to add?
I think he was going to talk about the underground in Turkey, because people should check out Cappadocia. Turkey has a lot of underground facilities they use to this very day. And some nomadic tribes get out of the sun and take a rest at an oasis, but it's underground. And so there's been quite a few stories of the people who live currently still, the Berber people still live in those areas and use underground stuff. But every time they stick a shovel down in Turkey, they find more underground caverns. So that's a real interesting story. I don't know if Bret was going to throw in for that.
Is Bret does he want to come on?
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Bret.
My
Bret
name's
Sheppard joining us.
As far as Cappadocia, Turkey, there's a wonderful thing that has happened there that was dug up, and it's basically an underground city, that could hold 20,000 people or so if it had to. And this was during a time of Civilian worship and lunar worship, so it was very pre-Christian. The Christian stuff came later, and they were actually considered pagans and took refuge there with the other people in Cappadocia. And what's interesting about that is that they were all survivors of the Black Sea floods and prior things that happened during the Hyperborean age before Sumeria. So it's very interesting how these stories came about. And their artwork, the symbols that they had, and the pottery and the art that they had in Cappadocia is very much a reflection on ancient Thracia and the Cappadocian dolmens. So it's a very unique place around the Black Sea area, and it ties into the moon, with the Illyrians and Macedonians and Thracians and Dacians. And these are all ancient people that during the Hyperborean age they worshipped gods and goddesses, that pretty much they said that came from the moon. So it's a very unique and interesting tie-in to the moon, and it also there later on, I guess Madame Blavatsky came out and said that something like the moon was, or the Earth came from the moon somehow. And I don't know. That's a little far-fetched for me. Anyway, it's a very interesting area. This area in Europe, in ancient Europe, during that time period is completely different than what we would see today. It was absolutely different, we had the Hyperborean migrations and such. So these were not cavemen. They were very very unique, and they survived the catastrophes, and they had pottery, and they had metallurgy, and all of these different things. And this was at an age where they said, that cavemen were, barely making fire or something. So, that's really not accurate at all. It seems like the farther back you go, the more advanced it gets. Yeah, they had machinery.
Right. So what do you think created this advanced technology? Or are you tying it with the Anunnaki, and what made it go downward?
Yeah, there were tunnel systems that couldn't even be made by our own machinery today.
Okay.
very easily because of the way it was dug into the ground, and sometimes it's completely vertical, and so it's not like it was like just bored into the side of a mountain. They actually went down into the ground. So it's a very unique thing. The technology that they would have had, and the machinery would have been incredible. Something that that there is evidence of, in actuality. Yeah, there's things that we don't have today, So something happened. We definitely had an insertion of some intelligence. Absolutely.
Right. And then you have found anomalies that kind of tie in, or they do tie in with the Earth or different cultures.
Yes, and I wouldn't have given it even a thought if I hadn't have seen this one image, and it actually had all of the Hyperborean gods and goddesses, and these gods and goddesses were wearing, bear skins, because of the cold. So within this lunar image, I was actually seeing a part of our history, and it's a very unique thing when that happens. It's beyond coincidence. It's not. It's very themed, and it's not just pareidolia. It's not something,
in Barbador, in Cambodia, there's just these kind of things. You walk around the stele, and it has the story, just like a motion picture, but you provide the motion by walking past a mural. So this is just something that has been used by the Anunnaki and other space-faring people to leave a record.
Yes. It's a very unique technique. Yeah.
Where can one see this image? Do you have it anywhere in a book, or is it on a website? This one you're talking about?
Yes, I'm actually still working on it because the content is so vast, So I'm still kind of working on it. I've got a bunch of those images that I could send you, Well, anyways, within this image, we're basically, all of the astrological signs, gods and goddesses, Hercules, Zeus, Hera, all of these people, and it's amazing. It's something that I see, I can see very clearly, but everyone knows if you look at the old moon images that they're a bit blurry, So I'm trying to bring these out as an artist.
Oh, I want to mention something to that extent, is that if people go on to YouTube and they look up the title All Hail Apollo, we did kind of a 3-part, or I think it's 4-part video series that shows what Bret is talking about. And part of what kind of helps people get a grip on it is that you have underground at Bashigi Mountains, you have holographic techniques, holographic technology, and you have apparently on the moon there was high technology, and at least I've heard David Wilcock said that a whistleblower said that when they went underground and walked along these panels in some kind of underground base, that holograms would pop up and show them information. And it's possible that there's a holographic projection going on the surface of the moon that wasn't necessarily picked up normally, but when we had our space cameras pointed at the moon at different times, it picked those up like a layer of a transparency. And a possibility that also there's something called geoglyphs, like they have the Nazca line as a geoglyph, some kind of indication that there's, a base on down where you see the geoglyph of a giant monkey or a parrot or something. That kind of thing. We also found some things like that in this video series, and we showed them. And Bret took some still photographs from the Lunar Orbiter image series and turned them into short animations. And if you watch them, you're really astounded because you can see UFOs skittering across the surface as well as these geoglyphs. And it's one of those things where this is the reason why they never show us film from those early days. They took film, but they typically don't show film, except for when Ken Johnston saw his film that was shown by Dr. Page, Thornton Page. But typically they show us stills because if you have certain things animated, you'll actually see things moving. So they tend to show stills instead of animation. But yeah, we that story. Ken, are you on? Because that's a great story about the fact that go ahead.
Right, Janet. While they were talking, it was really interesting because, and I've said artists use a different part of their brain than what most of us do. And I was showing some of the archive that I have of the Apollo 15 command module as the Apollo 15 lunar module was coming up to rendezvous and dock for later to transfer back to the Earth. Bret says, take a look what's on the lunar surface. Now, I've had these pictures for 40 and 45 years, and I've always, as an engineer, I've always looked at the command module. Oh, yeah, it looks fine, da-da-da-da. And he says, look on the lunar surface. And I look on the lunar surface, and if people go to Ken Johnston Media.
Hold that thought. You're looking on the lunar surface. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Sorry, it's the top of the hour. Time for break. See you in 3.
Sounds great.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we were originally scheduled to have John Lear. I'm not sure he got on, but right now we have Karen Christine Patrick and Bret Sheppard and Dr. Ken Johnston, and we're talking about the moon and other anomalies around the Earth and on other planets and in the solar system. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the link on freedomslips.com or freedomslips.com and donate to whatever you can on that donation button. $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do appreciate your donation. Thank you very much. Dr. Les, what would you like to say?
Well, we've been talking to Ken Johnston, and one of the things that he mentioned in the first part of the show is that he actually flew some of the extraterrestrial craft. Now, I wondered where you're situated when you're flying it and what it was like, and if you could go give us a little detail what that was all about, flying spacecraft of aliens.
And I do want to ask our producer, Sean, before you answer that question, did we get John Lear on the show?
Okay. I was going to say that, Dr. Listen, is that to fly one of the small craft, you become part of it. And basically, you're just thinking, I want to go here, I want to go there. And it's kind of like a race car as far as having speed and everything else. But and as I recall, my whole ambition or the time was I wanted to go back home. I wanted to see Mom. And but then again, this other craft grappled, so to speak, or was able to stop me from doing that and brought back in. I was having fun. That's the only thing I can remember about that. And then, of course, all this came about from the regression hypnosis that you put me through. And this has only been
Were you standing
2
up,
weeks.
or were you in a chair, or were you standing up?
Oh, wow, interesting question. I believe I was sitting down. My mind says I had to have been sitting down. So, okay. Now,
what were you,
can I go back into?
Where were your hands? Yeah. If you can actually, if you want to let yourself do this, you can actually take the time and take some deep breaths and go back there and actually be there phenomenologically and get a sense of what the atmosphere is like and what it looks like and smells like and everything like that.
Well, I'm almost doing a regression hypnosis session right now. Wow. I can see it's either a screen, a console where I can see, or there's actually a window that I can see out. And in reality, I don't think I really know where I'm going. I'm just saying, okay, I'm going back home, and I'll have to try that when I have a little more time, because all I know is that I had been trained how to fly because I was supposed to go different places and do things, but then I decided I was going to deviate and try to go back home. That's where I got caught, and but it was fun. So anyway, we were talking about the bases on the moon or the things, and the difference between an artist looking at some of these photographs that I have. By the way, my archive was from the 8x10 pictures made from the original negatives. And, people, in fact, I think the best way people could find out what it's like would be if they went to my blog there, go to KenJohnstonMedia.com, and they can get a free 16-page Lunar Anomalies, one of the chapters from my book, free, and that way they'll get a chance to see what we were talking about. Now, I was looking at the command module, and Bret says, look what's on the lunar surface there. And I started looking, and my God, there's about 12 to 15 domes all lined up nice and neat and in straight lines and stuff. And, geology just doesn't do things like that. And he took it and he enlarged it, and we've added that into the book. And that's part of one of the things that you'll see if you go to that and get that free copy of the Lunar Anomalies. So how extensive is that array of domes? How much area does it cover, and how big are they? Okay, that question was asked to me very recently, and if you look on that one, we'd have to look at one of the craters, and I would say that we're talking about that particular base is going to have to be several miles in area, and the domes themselves are going to have to be in order of a quarter of a mile in diameter, and it's huge. And I'd love for people to have a chance to go and take a look at it. I mean, these are you have to realize that we did not have airbrushing and all kinds of technology then, and these pictures I had didn't have the opportunity, or fortunately were never put through having painted out, smudged out. Those things are what happened to a lot of the pictures that you get nowadays. In fact, we kind of describe it like if you order this picture, and I give the numbers AS-15, which is Apollo 15, AS-15-88-11970, and that's the photograph we're talking about. If you go and you order that from NASA's archive or wherever, and you go and you look down on the lunar surface where it is, you can see that it has been smudged out to where you can't see it. You can't see what's really there. But you go to the original pictures that I have, and your jaw's going to hit the floor and say, oh, my God, this was back in 1970 when we went to the moon. Okay, did we have bases on the moon like that? No, not to any of my knowledge. And they're inside the inner sanctums of NASA. And so there, and then I think, Janet, you asked me to talk about the film that we watched that I got to show to Dr. Thornton Page. Now,
yes.
Dr. Thornton Page,
oh, yes, uh-huh.
he was the director of the Lunar and Planetary Science Department at NASA at the Johnson Space Center, JSC. Back then it was the MSC, Manned Space Center. Anyway, he came to me in my office there at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory and said, could you go to the main photo lab and pull this Apollo 14 reel, 16-millimeter film? Now, having been in the Marine Corps and been a pilot, I know what a gun sequence camera is, a projector. He said, get a projector so we can analyze this film. And so I did what I was told. I got it, set it up, and met just foul. Anyway, in the building right next door to Mission Control, and once we got set up, and there was Dr. Page and about 6 other scientists, and I'm showing this film, and we're on the back side of the moon, and the sun angle is about 45 degrees, so you're getting half of the craters are in shadow, and we're approaching crater Tsiolkovsky, and there in the shadowed area of Tsiolkovsky is this a cluster of domes that are illuminated from the inside, and the best way I can describe is if you'll take your hand, put it with the palm up, and bring all of your fingers together in one little cluster, you're looking at 5 little balls, the tips of your fingers, but that's the way it was in the shadows. And he had me stop the camera, project, back up, zoom in, approach frame at a time, 2 frames at a time. Those are things you can do with a sequence camera. And that's what they do. If you've ever seen movies where one airplane's fighting another airplane and they're shooting bullets at it, and that's a gun sequence camera. Well, you can go back and you can analyze a film frame by frame. And that's what he had me do. He had me stop. He says, okay, boys, what do you think? And they all laughed and had a big laugh about it. And later, I had to check that film back in that day. And the next day I was to take the same reel and show it in the main auditorium at NASA there for the rank and file engineers and personnel during lunch to go take a look at what we had found on the backside of the moon. It was exciting, and I was told to keep it quiet so nobody will, they let them see what they're going to see. Well, the next day when I'm showing it, and I even had my brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, there in the booth with me in the projection booth, and we're coming up on Tsiolkovsky, and then shadowed dark area. There was nothing there. I mean, it was gone. And I stopped it and told the audience, I said, we're having technical difficulties, just a minute. I took the film out, analyzed, checked it. There was no splices, all the holes lined up. There was no way that it was gone. So I put it back in and finished showing it and went back to the photo lab to check the film back in. And interesting thing is, now this was the day before when I checked it back in after showing it to Dr. Page, going into the photo lab. There's 3 different areas. You go into the front office where you can order pictures and things, or if you've got a secret clearance, you can go in the middle and then you can have the things and you can analyze them and do them in there. Or you can go into the 3rd area, have a top secret to be able to retrieve the actual film. Now, in the middle area, when I was taking the film back the first day after Dr. Page had me show it, there was in the middle room, there was a light table, probably about 3 by 4 feet, illuminated from inside, and they had negatives, large negatives on it, and they were painting things out on the negatives. And I asked them, I said, what are you guys doing? One of the guys, he quipped, he says, we're professional strippers. And there were 2 guys and 1 gal. And the lady says, no. He says, we call it stripping because what we do is we're painting out the horizon and stars and things because that would be confusing to people. People just want to see what the moon craters look like. And that seemed a little strange that I was on the schedule. I had to put the film back in. And then on my way to the next day, after I showed the film in the main auditorium, and I went and checked it back in, on my way back to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, I ran into Dr. Page, and I asked him what happened to the domes and things that we saw on the backside of the moon. And he looked at me and did a nice long wink and said, there was never anything there. Okay. What a letdown, what a shock. I was so excited about being part of the team that was looking at the evidence of obviously intelligent life in habitats or domes or place on the moon, and then now it's all gone. Now, there's other people like myself that said, there were things that we saw, things that happened that we wanted to be able to go back and research them. But the way things were being done is that every 2 to 3 years a contract was over, and they would transfer us. They'd do what they call a RIF, that's a reduction in force. Like once we landed on the moon with Apollo 11, Grumman laid off almost 30,000 employees nationwide. And so we didn't have access to the things we had before where we saw these anomalies and things happen. So here I am, a guy that, looking back, I can say, well, you know what? Dr. Page had to know exactly what we were looking for, because he had me take a specific reel and set it up for a private showing to show the other guys probably what he had already seen. And that's the only analysis I did, because how else would he have known?
That's right. I think that, when I analyze your situation, this is why I've come to the conclusion that you were set up with this, that the film that you showed the second day had to have already been made, and that you were shown this, and you were given a post-hypnotic suggestion that at a certain time you would recall and make this stuff available. That's half of the story. And then the other half of the story is how you came to keep these things, and also that was a setup. The more I listened in detail, the more it seems like you were deliberately set up to be an ambassador and to a disclosure.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I had always figured that within 24 hours that they had to have taken that film and made enlargements of it, painted things out, and then put it back in, and then rephotographed and made a new reel. But what you say makes more sense, is that they would have already had the duplicate reel ready to show the next day for me to check out. So you're right, I was set up. That makes a lot more sense than how taking only 24 hours and being able to do what they would have had to have done to paint out the existence of those domes. Now, here's a good one for you. I also kept all of the slides, 35-millimeter slides of a lot of the really good pictures and things on the lunar surface. Well, here, Bret Sheppard is going through my slides, and he goes to Tsiolkovsky, and he says, "Oh my God, look at this!" And he had zoomed in on the shadowed area of Tsiolkovsky, and there, through the painted out or the smudged out area, you can literally see 5 illuminated parts. It's kind of fuzzy, but you could actually see. In other words, whoever painted them out didn't put enough paint over it to keep it over 40 years. And so whenever we went to those slides and projected them up, oh my God, they're still there. So it proves that it was. And that's something else that John Lear, he had talked about some of the bases and the domes and things, which I think was fantastic, because it gave more credence to the fact that the things that I had seen back in 1969, 1970, 1971.
Yeah, Lear says there was a 250,000 people on the moon, 250,000 people.
That's a lot of people, and
yeah.
If they're having a party, I didn't get invited to that one yet, but hey, it's possible. It's possible.
Okay,
the base.
Yeah, and then go ahead.
One at a time.
Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah, that base that I was talking about from Apollo 15 on that one, AS-15. Was it 88? I love that number. AS-15 88 11970. I will never forget that number. That base would probably hold that many people. You go to that website of mine and pull up that picture, take a look at it yourself, and you're going to say, wow. You're talking about miles in size, the whole base, and the number of domes and the way they're laid out and such. I mean, the domes themselves can be a mile or so each in diameter. You can talk about room for a lot of people on the moon.
Yeah, it sounds like you take a huge football stadium and turn it upside down. That's how big it is in my mind.
Yeah. So,
then I guess the next part of the picture is how you were set up to actually retain the film evidence that you retained, because that was obviously a setup too.
Yeah, and it was posted on my website, and I was a little bit concerned because the exact word that was used said was stolen. No, the pictures I have, when I was the director of the Data and Photo Control Department, okay, my job was to maintain at least 5 complete sets of all of the films for each mission, so that when the scientists would come from all over the world to pick up their portions of lunar samples material to take back and analyze, they wanted to have photographs taken from orbit of the terrain where their sample came from. They wanted to have photographs from on the surface from the Hasselblad cameras that the astronauts had as they were going around. And so I would have to have sets of those available in case, because when you take one lunar rock, and you cut it up into 20, 30, 40, or more slices for thin sections for analysts, for analyzing, I had to have a lot of pictures available because they would be asking for the same pictures. Okay. Then after Apollo 16, my immediate supervisor, I was working for the, at the Lunar Signal Lab, that was for Brown and Northrop Corporation at the time. Bud Lascala, who's my supervisor, came into my office there in the LRL and said, Ken, I got the direction that said, we want you to dispose of all but one set of all of those pictures. We don't need to keep all that many around all the time anymore. And by the way I had set it up to do it and to do black and white copies from color negatives, I did such a good job. I have a letter from NASA where they gave me a $1,000 bonus. Now, in 1971, $1,000 bonus is a pretty big bonus. Only one other person had ever received that much. So, anyway, I'm arguing with him. I said, no, well, look, this was paid for by our taxes. There are a lot of universities that have science departments that would love to have a set of these. Why don't I just ship them? No. He says it came from very high authority. Get rid of them. I don't care what you do. Dump them in the dumpster. Get rid of them. Keep one set. So I thought about that, and I said, okay, they don't care what I do. Just get rid of them. So I took 3 sets, dumped them in the dumpster. I took one set that I kept for the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, and I kept one complete set for myself. Now, mind you, I had been keeping a pretty good little archive for myself just for later on in history. And I gave one set to Oklahoma City University, my alma mater. And years later, when I went back to retrieve it, I was only able to get a portion of it because I think some of them had been absconded. Anyway, the point being is I did as I was told. I got rid of them, all except for one set. And the set that I kept for myself.
I want to look at that very closely because this is what, at first it might seem like you might have stolen stuff, but I know you didn't because what you were given here is a specific command, even though it was made indirectly, put them in the dumpster. And when you put them in the dumpster, and the next thing that happens, another whistleblower gets some of them out of the dumpster. So this is not an accident. Usually the military destroys things when it destroys them. This is a setup.
Right.
I just want to interject. My husband and I worked at WRS Motion Picture Labs, and we had a part where we would get the military secret films, or they weren't like the top secret, but they were pretty secret, and he had to shred them all. He had to take these movies apart and shred them. So they don't just tell you to put them in the dumpster.
Well, they were Now, it's interesting because it was only a year and a half ago that I ran into another person by the name of Donna Hare, who I'm quite sure she may have been the lady that was in there doing the smudging and painting out one of those 3 people. But that's her story to tell. But she has said that she had found in the dumpster all of these pictures and had kept a set of them. So I'm not the only person that was able to keep these pictures so that now the truth can be had. And as a matter of fact, with Bret's help, Bret Sheppard, we put together the Ken's archive, all of the pictures now, so the whole world can go in and look at them themselves, the originals, and that's already available too. They go to that KenJohnstonMedia.com and they can find it. So it's the truth is finally getting out there, and that's what we're doing, is getting it available where anybody can go in and look at it, and the truth shall set you free.
Great.
And what do you think that this freedom means, and why are we being given it now? What's your take on the disclosure that's really happening? It's happening, and you're one of the main agents of it.
Well,
why now?
Why now? Because it's time. It's time for the truth to come out. Because we're at a point where I think humanity, humans, we need to get things straightened out about how we were. And I guess it kind of goes back to the way Jay Goldberg and I talked about one time in his office, where we were talking about what would be the effect of if we had direct contact with extraterrestrials. And he said, well, we've been conditioned, or we're being conditioned, because if you look at back in the day of H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, and people panicked, some people jumped off of buildings, and they just knew that we were going to be destroyed. And then the blob comes along and it eats everything going on, and stage by stage, we're getting to the point where if a craft landed on the White House lawn and this big blue fuzzy thing comes walking out, and a little kid says, "Look, Mommy, there's the Cookie Monster. He's my friend." And so Brookings Institute, when they did the analysis for President Eisenhower to determine what would be the effect if we were to discover the existence of extraterrestrial life, what would it have on effect on society? And their analysis, back then, it was published in the New York Times, so it's still available. You can go on the internet and look up Brookings Institute on extraterrestrials. And they said that evidence has shown that any time one more advanced civilization comes in contact with a lesser advanced, the lesser loses its identity and basically ceases to exist. And their directive to the president was that we most likely will find evidence of extraterrestrial either on Mars, the Earth, or the Moon. And in fact, having been part of that and being able to see it. Now, so you're saying, why is it coming out now? Because now we're at a point where even the Pope says there obviously would be intelligent life elsewhere in the universe. It's just that they're just not quite ready to say they're also right here on the planet Earth or the Moon or Mars. And so I guess we've been, those of us like Donna Hare and myself and others, we have been used or manipulated to be at the right place at the right time to do the right thing. And mine was to save these pictures and be able to make them available to so that the truth can come out there. I mean, you've given me new thought about, for instance, the film, that they could have had that already ready, and I was being used. In fact, when Dr. Page looked at me and winked at me, he said there was never anything there. This was just one day later. And so obviously, I wasn't really on the end. I was being manipulated and being used. Yeah. I've never thought about it that way. I always thought I was in control. Guess I'm not. The other consequence of this disclosure that I see, it's not just that the technologically more advanced society rolls over the other one, but it brings us back to the wisdom of the Native Americans, of the Indians of India, who have traditions that aren't strangled by Catholicism and are able to say, yes, we have a relationship with the star people. So that rather than the technologically less developed, if you want to call it that, societies being eaten up, they are ultimately a part of our savior, being able to escape from the materialism that's killing our planet. Well, it's that's been taking place throughout all of our history, and Zachariah Sitchin did such a fantastic job of trying to show the true history, and of course one of my doctorates is in divinity, and having studied the major religions of the world, it took, you get to the point where you can start looking at what looks like it's the same thing with this religion and the same with this other, but not with the other one. And then looking at what the ancient Sumerian texts are. Now you can see how the history in the Bible has been designed to put the information there that is part of our history, And to the point where, as a theologian, I don't have a problem with accepting the fact that, when we talk about extraterrestrial, I are one. In other words, the way our DNA was manipulated in order to do what was necessary. And now we're at a point where, okay, we need to be able to join the intergalactic civilization of intelligent sentient beings, and to do that, we have to mature beyond the parts of our civilization, our history, of where if we don't like it, we go to war and we change it. No, we need to become much more mature and able to go. So we're going to go beyond what Brookings Institute said. We're at a place now where, as a sentient beings, Homo sapiens, we can accept that, and now we're ready for disclosure.
Yeah. One of the species that has been around was already here, Homo erectus, when the Anunnaki decided they were going to use some of the Sasquatch, proto-Sasquatch genes to make their genome, the Nibiran genome, work on Earth. I saw today on the internet that a bunch of American hunters had shot this hairy person swimming in a lake, thinking it was Sasquatch, but then they were so sorry it turned out to be a human being. And when I read that, I was flabbergasted that you could shoot a Sasquatch. These are highly intelligent, intuitive beings that are able to communicate telepathically, and to shoot one of them, it turns out they were just shooting another Homo sapien. It just shows the barbarity that some of our citizens have stooped to.
Amazing.
Well, that's what we need to. We need to mature past the barbarism.
Well, I was talking to some people last week on another radio show, and they said it's illegal. Some of the states have passed laws. It's illegal to shoot Sasquatch. So, just in case you run across one, it may be illegal, and you'll go to jail for the rest of your life, which it should be. So, is Karen and are Karen and Bret still with us?
I am.
Absolutely, they're with us.
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about one of the things that Ken's told us. We live here in the same town with him and work with him, and have been enjoying him regaling us with his great stories about the NASA years. And one of the things that I thought about was he said that on our way back from the moon at Apollo 17, now Ken said he didn't hear it, but some ham radio operators and other heard a voice come on an open radio channel, and say, basically, don't come back, you're not ready. In other words, and we didn't. We didn't have Apollo 18, 19, or 20 happen. And then, bringing it up to today, we live in New Mexico, and we have this spaceport that was built by Sir Richard Branson. And, of course, he's been trying to get a spacecraft to where, and he's a billionaire, to help millionaires go on a spacecraft and go up into space and experience space, which might be a good idea. If they see it's just all one planet, maybe they wouldn't be so greedy. I don't know. But it's made me think of what do they mean by we're not ready? And I think one other component besides us being used to, not being so xenophobic and maybe being used to the idea of seeing beings very different from us, is also the idea that, he's not able, we can't get off this, unless we have a secret space program, at least openly, we don't seem to be able to leave the Earth, near Earth orbit. So we've had our, space station up there and our shuttle going back and forth to the space station, and now we don't have that anymore even. The thing is, what is the ticket to space? What is the way that we would be allowed to be part of the galactic civilization and go to space? And what I concluded, especially since we've had a global economic, turn down and depression, is that we probably are very barbaric, not just because we shoot at Sasquatch or anything else that we're afraid of, but also because we don't provide for all of our people and we don't protect the environment. So basically, we've got the spaceport, we've got some resources to try to go to space, and we still can't do it. And I think it's because they're going to keep us here on the ground until we realize how horrible starvation, homelessness, war, and degradation of the environment is, and we start showing some so to speak, fruits of our repentance and start resolving those issues. Because that's, when you go out into space and you're ambassadors to space, you're representing your civilization. I don't think they want any more negativity out there any more than we would want someone to come into our country with negative intentions in mind. So they're making sure that we've got to stay grounded on the ground until we straighten out.
We have to understand, and I think Sasha will agree with me, is that we had very good teachers. The Anunnaki really taught us well how to be barbaric and war and do things. And now not impression, but from what I gleaned from what I'm seeing and hearing from the space program, where we are at now and where our advancements are in Mars, et cetera, is that the Anunnaki are now having to kind of fix what they created, the Homo sapiens sapien, and the way in which they had embedded in our history, the way in which you get along. Now they're trying to help us not destroy the Earth and not destroy ourselves, but yet to mature enough that we can then be a valuable part of the whole intergalactic intelligentsia, if you will, and that in itself gives us the incentive to not have war, to not destroy our atmosphere, and to take care of our people that don't have much. And a lot of it is all bad politics, and some of the I'm convinced that there's some of the Anunnaki that are still here that are still using humans to treat them as gods and get all the money they can or the power. It's all about power. It's all about power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot going on now.
The Linkage Institute, A.R. Borden and others who are in regular contact with the Anunnaki, basically said that it's no nukes, including the nuclear power plants that are so vulnerable, no war and no pollution is what it's going to take to help us go from a zero level population civilization to a level 1, where spacefaring population. And the Anunnaki leadership has basically come back, and they're present here on Earth, and they're working very hard to curtail the terrible system that they set up of pitting us against each other in religion and in war and in territory and economic interests. And a lot of it just comes down to the kind of things that Jesus was talking about, of honoring women, helping the less fortunate, and feeling the collective and with love.
And teaching us the true history of our existence and letting us know where the mistakes were made. And I think that's exactly perhaps what all of those students, ambassadors' job is going to be, is to help each one of our races or nationalities or what have you come to grips with the fact that everything they've been told is not exactly the truth. And I jokingly say, that the Harry Potter story when he's saying, the professor says, the truth will ferret you out, or the truth will will out, is what he said. So we're hoping that the truth that we're now hearing, and that those of us who have been manipulated to be at the right place and do this stuff, can be a part of helping get the real truth out there. But when you have organizations where they've been trained as infants to carry somebody's head around, and that they believe that if they don't do, it's unbelievable to have societies that are that barbaric. And it's going to take time to get the truth out and get people to realize that stuff that we've been fed all of our lives is not the truth, and the truth is where we want to go to. We got to work together.
Bret, what do you got to say about all this?
Yeah, Bret, we want to make sure you're not left out.
Well, there's something very interesting about the...
Hey, move away from each other. Bret, okay. Move away from the other phone. Okay, we're getting stereo, Bret.
Oh, okay.
Start over.
There you go.
Okay. There's something very interesting about the Dr. Thornton Page story. He was part of the Robertson panel for the CIA, and his sole job, was to investigate the 10% of UFO images or lunar anomaly images that could be actually proven. So his job was to scrub those out. That was his job, you know, along with Jim Oberg and others that were under him. So, you know, that tells me that they absolutely 100% knew that that was real.
And they conveyed it, you know, to Ken. They let Ken know that it was there.
Yeah.
That was deliberate.
Yes, and it's very eerie when I look back at my own experience how exactly how they show people these things as an insertion or whatever you call it, and we carry this with us, you know, our whole lives. You know, this experience that we somehow can't prove, and it seems like there's so many people that know about it, but nobody is saying anything about it.
Tell us about your experience that proved it to you.
Well, what happened to me when I was 15 years old is that a lady from SRI came into my art class, and she showed me one slide after another on this carousel of slides, and she had many boxes of these slides, and I don't know how long I was there. It was an art class that was at the end of the day in my high school, you know, and my teacher knew about it. The other teacher knew about it. They talked about it. I remember them talking about it. Yet when I called them recently, they said that they don't recall and they won't collaborate. You know, they're using these military terms, you know. So it's something that I know happened in my reality, you know. And Ken feels the same way about his experience. It happened. And whether people recall it or collaborate it or whatever, it is our experience that we are conveying to the public, you know, so that it can at least be recorded in history.
What did you see in the pictures?
Oh my gosh! What I saw in the pictures were the exact anomalies that I saw in lunar and Mars images 40 years later.
Wow.
You know, so this was a very amazing thing to me, and I was triggered by a lady named Amy Evans, who Bob Evans is, you know, the solar guy. Bob Evans' wife.
Oh, I know Amy, yes.
Yeah, Amy. And she showed me a Mars image, and that triggered everything. She said, look really close at this. There's like a civilization below these sprays or whatever. And I looked at it, and I remembered the older image. And what's amazing is what really got me triggered as far as that goes is that image wasn't taken until 1998, and I saw it in 1982.
Wow.
So that's something that was very unusual about that particular Mars image. And from there, it triggered me, and I started looking at all of the space images, especially Lunar Orbiter, and seeing the exact same things in black and white that I saw on the slides in 1982. And then here comes Ken, you know, here comes Ken and Donna, and they're showing me these images that no one's ever seen, yet there's aspects of those images that I saw in 1982.
Bret, if you could get your yearbook for those years and contact some of your former classmates, that would give us a... I tried. I was the only one that saw those images with that lady.
You forgot about Chris. There was
there was a guy named Chris, but he didn't stay for the whole thing because his brother came and got him.
When Bret tried to contact him, he's in a mental institution right now.
Right. Yeah. So I have tried to contact everyone that was involved in that.
I guess the next thing is as a detective, I would want to trace this woman and what happened to her possessions.
Well, Zemina Zarita, that was the lady's name. I remember it because you know, my art teacher actually made fun of her name and called her Nagzima. So these are little details that I remember, just like Ken remembers the lighting on the moon. I remember these things, you know. And I contacted her because she is still alive and she still works for Stanford Research Institute, you know. So I contacted her, and I guess she's a professor now working for Stanford University, and she doesn't recall any of it. But those are the words she used. I don't recall.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's something amazing about that
programmed.
Story. It seems very programmed.
Very programmed response.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's very programmed response. And my art teachers, both of them said, I don't recall.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
There appears to be some evidence that not just the astronauts, but I would say this art teacher have been deprogrammed. And we've looked, Mr. Richard Hoagland and myself, we've looked at the timeline of when we got back and where the astronauts were, et cetera. And some of the astronauts, you ask them, what did it feel like? They can't tell you what it felt like, what they're telling you. They just, they go into the mission. Well, we had this to do, we did this, we did that, et cetera. Now, I'm trying to think of the name of what they do when they deprogram you and program you to do something else, and it takes a certain event to trigger.
Debriefing.
Yeah, well, the debriefing. Very nice. So,
Manchurian candidates.
So what happens when an astronaut comes back in? How long is he gone? What happens to him? Is it different if he's military or not military?
Well, I can only go for the few that I was involved with, and for instance, we were looking at Richard Hoagland and his scientific team and everything else. We were trying to determine if there was any way that some of the information that was found on the moon was able to then taken out of the boxes or what have you. Well, when you look at the splashdown and the spacecraft being taken on board the aircraft carrier, and the initial ones they were put in quarantine. On the aircraft carrier that had an aircraft take off and fly to Hawaii to then transport the boxes. Well, there was a period of about 4 hours that we can't account for from by the time that the crew and the spacecraft was loaded on board the aircraft carrier until it got to Hawaii, and then from there to Ellington Air Force Base just outside of NASA, Houston. So there was ample time that those boxes could have been opened and items taken out of them and then shipped them out. Now, one of the ways that I can say, our original concern was, were there any pathogens that could have been transferred from the moon to planet Earth and cause us all kinds of problems? And what happened on the very first return of Apollo 11 with the vacuum sealed boxes of all the lunar samples are landed at Ellington Air Force Base, and what happens? But Gil Ruth and all the other NASA big cheeses run out, and they all grab this box, and they've got the two technicians that are supposed to carry the boxes and go into quarantine with the astronauts. They're moved out of the way for this big photo op. So obviously they knew there weren't any pathogens or something. So it's kind of these little events that take place, you can look at them now and say, aha, well, somebody knew.
Was there any artifacts, human-made or intelligence-made objects among the things brought back from the moon?
Well, particularly on Apollo 17, down in one of the craters where the pictures and everything, we jokingly call it Data's head. It looked like a robot's head, blown apart. There were other areas things that look like they're technological pieces of equipment and stuff that had been strewn. Because you have to understand, the moon is still actively being hit by meteors, and who knows exactly when these things may have been destroyed or where they're at. And right now, where Chang 2, I think the Chinese have landed, there's it appears that there's a lot of evidence that they went over to the edge of a crater and looked into something that was there, and that they claimed that they never went there. But yet, when you look at one of the overhead from one of our satellites of the as to where the rover went, there's a complete tracks from where it landed over to the edge of that crater and back that they've never admitted and come forward about. So, there are things that have been brought back or that have been analyzed that we've never been able to see. So, yeah, I think the evidence is all there.
Thank you.
High technology, we're not, I mean, average people on this planet that are looking at technology. Let's face it, even our Black Ops aircraft things used to take, 10, 20 years before we'd actually know where they're at. So I've been part of some of it and not enough of it.
Have you ever talked to Jose Escamilla and looked at the images that he discovered and the movies he's made? Have you ever watched those? His Moon Rising? Any of you? Karen? Bret?
Yeah, I've seen his movie, and in his recent movie that he had, UFOs in Outer Space, had one of Bret's other anomaly discoveries. I think Jose's movies are really amazing. They bring out a lot of deep research that is not generally recognized, and I recommend all of his movies to anybody. But yeah, the one I kind of just cue off right now off the top of my head was the one with the colors on the moon, because that's something else, is that we see so many black and white, at least with Ken's material, see some color images. They're always showing the moon in black and white, and they've kind of created this meme in our mind that the moon is a grayscale kind of place. And at least in one of his movies, it's showing the color, putting the color back into the lunar surface, which of course...
Yeah, that movie's called Celestial. That's amazing.
Celestial, yes. I recommend, I think he lives does he live pretty close to you or something? I forget where he lives. But you might want to contact him and have him come look at the images, and you go compare some notes with each other, because I know you missed watching Celestial at the UFO Congress because you came the next day or something. You missed it. But
Jose said that he had...
wait, stop. Bret, you got to move apart from each other, or it's all echo. There we go. Now, go ahead.
Jose had said that he had acquired some original full-scale Clementine images. So I'm very excited to see some of those. And he knows that we're working with Ken, and he's excited to see some of Ken's images as well. So, yeah, I'm in contact with Jose. I've talked to him. He's supposed to send me a hat because I was in one of his movies or something.
Oh, good.
yeah, but I'm excited about what all of the whistleblowers are coming out with, and journalists, and it's amazing, I think we will have a citizen's disclosure, because the mainstream media and the people in politics and religion are kind of strapped, as far as that goes, so it can't really come from them. It's something that will not come from them. It'll come from the experiences of all of the people that have had certain experiences that say for sure to those particular individuals that have had a human experience that extraterrestrials are real, UFOs, of course, there's things that are in the skies that we can't describe or can't really satisfy with military technology or anything else. And there's also, bases on the moon. There's structures and ruins on the moon. So, there's these things that we're looking at in some of these original images and that are going to come out to the public, and it will be more of a citizens type disclosure. And I highly doubt that it'll go to Washington or be discussed in any real manner with science or anything like that, or religion.
Well, we're the ones having the discussion. I just wanted to add real quickly that Jose has some health challenges, so I would like you to make this, put this on the top of your list to contact him, because he's had some health challenges, and we never know when we're not going to be here anymore. So it's really good for us to do this research sooner rather than later. And after watching talking to your team, and watching Celestial, I said, oh, you've got to connect those pieces of the puzzle. There's lots of images on Celestial and that Jose has that, you may or may not have. But what sparked that comment was what you were saying about the Chinese went to that certain crater, and they probably got that information about where to look from these Clementine and other images. Dr.
Well,
the
Chinese lunar map is nothing more than the old naval Clementine map. It is the high resolution version of the Clementine map. So that
right.
That supposed high resolution map that the Chinese have from Change 2, it is I believe shared technology or whatever with our military and the Chinese or something to that nature. It's some kind of black ops thing, because the lighting is exactly the same in that map as it is in the Clementine map, and that's of course impossible. You can't have the same exact lighting.
Sasha has a question or comment.
Yeah, this is for both Bret and Ken. We've had a series of hearings, and you Ken have testified at some of the hearings. I just wonder what your senses of the hearings, what effect they've had, and what that was like for you. And for the people that don't know what they're all about, if you could just give them a brief background on the hearings for disclosure.
Are you talking about the Steve Bassett ones?
I'm talking about about the one that Ken testified with Hoagland
in 2001.
In 2001.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the Greer hearings after that.
Ken, you want to talk to that because you went to the National Press Club 2 times, went to '96, and then later on you want to talk about that, Ken? He's here.
He's coming back.
May I jump in on this one?
Yeah.
Sure.
The fact that from the Brookings Institute's directive to the President of the United States, and the fact that the intention was to protect our way of life, our society that we had developed, what have you, and once you get stuck into that mode, we are now, I say those of us that are helping disclosure come right now, is making it easier for the government to be able to come clean and say, well, we were really doing what we thought was best, what we were told to do. And I think those of us who are part of soft disclosure or true disclosure, are actually making it easier for the government to be able to come clean and us to be able to move forward into this direction. So, yeah, we're all part of this.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak to that, too, a little bit, is that one of the things, I'm picking up what you're saying, Sasha. One of the things I'm watching myself throughout this whole process is the concept of timelines that have to happen. And if people aren't familiar with timelines, you can find out more about that. That there's I've heard it from multiple sources that humanity is facing 2 basic timelines. One was a catastrophic timeline, not unsimilar from the cyclical things that happened when Nibiru came through, as well as a positive golden age kind of timeline. So what I hope people could get across from what I'm saying right now is the feeling that Bret and Ken and I have talked about, and also I'm a colleague with Andrew Bishago, who's talked about this, and also Alfred Weber, who's talked about this, because both Alfred Weber and Andrew Bishago had their material brought back in time. And in the case of Andrew, he was a kid, and he had his Life on Mars paper brought to him to read while he was recovering from an illness by his father. And it was his future paper that he writes many, many, many years later. And I had a chance to hear that story in detail from Andrew at a conference. So when Bret and I were talking about it, I was telling Bret that I think, especially the colorization of the black and white images, this is something that Bret does to help people see what's there, that Bret was looking at his own work from the future, and they were bringing it back in time to a time where they know who he was, where he was in high school, because they wanted him to get that in his mind to reinforce the timeline so he would find it later as part of the disclosure process. And I don't know if he's ever accepted that that's true, because we've gone back and forth on it. But I also told him that we were going to meet somebody from NASA. and it was going to be right at our house. And that actually happened because Ken came and got us to Texarkana and moved us to New Mexico. And so, you know, we're on some kind of timeline, and I have sort of particular memory for time loops if they go back and forth. And these have also been discussed by Randy Kramer and Corey Good and Michael Ralph, that there's some manipulation in time that's either done by our government, that has access to time technology to manipulate things, but it's also something that I think extraterrestrials also have access to. And this eerie feeling, often very frustrating, by the way, because we don't know what they want from us. You know, if you've been on this breadcrumb path where the next thing and the next thing and the next thing happens, and it's always the same material. Like we can't hardly do other kinds of work, but we always have the technology and the ability to do this work throughout our entire lives. That's been the case. And as we've listened to Ken's story, I've gotten the same impression. There seems to be this beaten down track that we're supposed to go in, and we now are down far enough collectively to talk about it, to say this is definitely about disclosure in some form or fashion. We have to go back and look at our space history with new eyes to see all these discrepancies and what I call NASA plot holes in the story. And we're all feeling that, and it seems like so many whistleblower people I know have that same feeling, that they seem to have been time manipulated down this path toward a specific goal. So I'm concurring with what you're saying, Sasha, that it really feels like that strongly from our perspective.
Karen, we have 1 minute left to the show. Wrap up, everybody. Say your final words and aloha or goodbye, whatever you say.
Go to KenJohnstonMedia.com. You can get that free 16-page report and see the books that we've been putting together. And I've been helping Ken with that, and he's a lot of fun to work with.
Okay, Ken, say goodbye to everybody. Are you there?
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and all I can say is that I'm thankful that we're having the opportunity to finally make what I've had all of these years available to everybody in the whole world, and they can get a chance to see what we really did. And there's no question in my mind, we did go to the moon, and this is the evidence to prove it.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Bret, final words. Are you there?
Yes. I'd just like to say thank you for giving us all the opportunity to be able to record this in history, you know.
Excellent.
Yeah, man, where's John?
Oh, yeah, well, where's John? We'll have to try to get him on another time. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Ken and Karen and Bret. Once again, another great show, and thank you, Sasha, for being my co-host, and thank you, Kitty, for helping us out on today's show. And John, thank you, John. Wherever you are, we hope you come back. Much love and blessings, and aloha.